Have you ever picked up a call on an ordinary afternoon, only to discover that your life was no longer your own? That the people you trusted most, your family, had been living an entirely different truth behind your back? My name is Jessica. I'm 34 years old, a legal consultant, a woman who worked hard to build a good name and a stable future. And for a long time I believed that if you were just good enough, kind enough, successful enough, your family would protect you. I was wrong. One phone call from a bank changed everything. It exposed a secret worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of quiet betrayal. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about identity, about justice. And the moment I realized that the people who gave me my last name had also stolen my future. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about rising, about reclaiming your voice when silence is no longer an option. So settle in, because what happened next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about family. When I opened the email from the bank that evening, I expected a misunderstanding, maybe a typo, maybe someone with a similar name. But what I saw was my signature on a mortgage I never signed. The loop at the end of the J in Jessica, the slant of the handwriting, was all too familiar. Not mine exactly. Close enough to belong to someone who had watched me write my name my entire life. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't the work of a stranger. It was my mother's handwriting. You see, when you grow up trusting people, you don't question everything they hand you. Like that stack of papers she gave me at Dad's birthday party. Just some health insurance forms, sweetie. Same here. We're switching providers. I didn't read them. 'Cause why would I? We were family. And family doesn't trick you, right? I've spoken to others since then. People who've had very similar stories. One woman told me her brother used her name to buy a car. Another shared how her parents opened 3 store cards in her name to build her credit. They all used the same line. We were just trying to help. But help without consent, that's not help. It's control wearing a mask called love. Looking back, the signs were there. The awkward silence at Christmas when I asked about Madison's new house. The way Mom looked down when I talked about finally paying off my student loans. I thought it was pride. Turns out, it was guilt. Here's something I wish I'd learned sooner. If someone asks you to sign something, and they rush you or say, it's no big deal, stop. Because anything worth signing is worth understanding. And trust is not a permission slip to skip the details. I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went yet. I thought it was just one loan, one mistake. But that night when Alex opened his laptop and started digging, I realized I was only seeing the tip of something much, much bigger. And I wasn't ready for what came next. The strange thing is, when something bad happens, your mind doesn't always go to panic first. It goes to denial. You tell yourself there must be a mistake, that there's still time to fix it quietly. That's what I told myself the night Alex came back to my apartment, laptop in hand, sandwiches under his arm. He'd been my best friend since college. The one person who could sit beside me in a storm and not ask, "Are you okay?" Because he already knew I wasn't. We sat down, opened the files from the bank. And that's when the lies began to spill. In the span of 7 months, while I thought my life was under control, my credit was falling apart behind the scenes. Alex pulled up the documents like puzzle pieces, clicking one after another. 3 credit cards in my name, all maxed out. Personal loan for $50,000. An unsecured business loan that used my investment account as collateral. And worst of all, my credit score, once 812, was now 613. I felt my stomach drop. I work in law. My reputation is my career. If word got out, if the firm suspected me of mismanaging finances or being involved in fraud, I could lose everything. You know what's hardest about a betrayal like this? Doesn't come from a hacker. Comes from your own living room. From people who know your passwords, your habits, your blind spots. Madison had visited my office on my birthday. Mom had borrowed my laptop to check her email. It all seemed so normal at the time. Now, Felt like part of a plan. I've met others since then. People who never checked their credit, who only found out years later that their names had been used. One woman told me her adult son bought a boat using her retirement account. Another had her niece apply for a student loan using her social security number. I trusted her, she said. That was my only mistake. Here's what I learned. Trust is not a substitute for awareness. No matter how close someone is to you, your financial identity is your responsibility. Check your credit score. Set up alerts. Freeze your report if you need to. Because once it's gone, reclaiming it takes more than just time. Takes strength. As I sat there with Alex that night, my credit crumbling, my name dragged through the mud, I realized I couldn't wait for an apology or a miracle. I needed answers. Real ones. And the only way to get them was to go straight to the people who had kept this secret for 7 months. People I called family. There's something surreal about standing in front of the house you grew up in, knowing you're no longer walking through that door as someone's daughter, but as someone demanding the truth. That night, I pulled into my parents' driveway with shaking hands and a folder full of evidence. It was quiet. The porch light was on like always. The smell of roast chicken drifted through the open window. Mom's way of softening hard news. Only this time, I wasn't the one being comforted. I stepped into the living room. My mom looked up with that familiar smile, like everything was normal. Jessica, you're here. Your father made spaghetti, your favorite. I didn't sit. Didn't even take off my coat. Instead, I placed the stack of papers on the table. Credit card statements, forged mortgage forms, screenshots of Madison's spending. Let's not pretend, I said. These are accounts opened in my name, using my credit, my investment account, my signature. And I want to know why. Madison sat at the table, tears already in her eyes. I didn't mean to. I just needed help with a house down payment. I thought I'd pay it back. My dad stayed silent at first, stirring sauce on the stove like nothing was happening. Then he finally spoke. His voice tired. Jess, you already have so much. Career, money, a reputation. Your sister just needed a chance. My mother stepped closer, pleading. We're family. I thought you'd understand. So many people carry this unspoken expectation that if you're the successful one in the family, it means you're the safe one to lean on. But being responsible doesn't mean being available for abuse. Being kind doesn't mean you say yes to being used. I looked Madison in the eye. Last month, you spent $9,000 on a spa weekend. $3,500 on handbags. What exactly was the plan to pay it back? She didn't answer. She couldn't. 'Cause there was no plan. Just assumption. That I'd keep being quiet. Keep carrying it. Here's what I've come to believe. Saying no to the people who raised you isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the bravest form of self-respect. Family should never be a free pass to hurt someone. And love, real love, requires boundaries. That night, as I walked out the front door, I wasn't angry, I was clear. This wasn't about a few bad decisions. This was organized, repeated, calculated. And the next day I'd find out that this wasn't just about my money or my name. They had used me to hurt people far beyond our home. And now, I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. The next evening, Alex came over again. This time with 2 cups of coffee and a look that told me something was seriously wrong. Jessica, he said, placing his laptop on my desk. I think this goes far deeper than we thought. He wasn't just talking about the mortgage or the credit cards. He was talking about a fund. A fake one, the Riverpine Growth Fund, created using my name, my job title, even a photo from my firm's website. My parents, they hadn't just used my identity to get by. They had used it to sell a dream to others. To friends, colleagues, old classmates. People who knew me, trusted me because I had always been the dependable one. The success story. And that's what they banked on. Solstice, a financial fraud analyst Alex brought in, showed me the paper trail. Over $5.2 million had passed through multiple accounts. including 2 overseas and 1 completely anonymous in Luxembourg. All of it traced back to a scam built around the illusion that I, Jessica Carter, was the face of a promising private investment fund. I couldn't breathe when I saw it, not because of the money, but because of the names on the list. People like Mrs. Ward, my high school English teacher, the woman who once told me I'd grow up to change lives with my words. "Your mother said I could trust you," she whispered when we met again. "That you were running this fund yourself. I put my entire retirement into it." She believed in me. They all did. And that trust was used as bait. This happens more often than we think. It's called affinity fraud, when scammers exploit the emotional bonds within families, churches, social circles, or cultural groups to gain trust and steal money. It doesn't start with spreadsheets or numbers. Starts with birthday cards, with family dinners, with just a little help. That's what makes it so dangerous, and so hard to see coming. Here's the truth I learned the hard way. When love is used as leverage, it's not love, it's manipulation. And when people weaponize your image to cover their crimes, you're not just a victim. You become their shield. But not anymore. That night, as Solstice traced the final transactions, she looked up and said just one thing. "Jessica, we need to go to the bank first thing in the morning, before the money disappears." And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a daughter anymore, or a sister. I was a witness. And I was ready to become the one thing they never expected. Their reckoning. Before we continue, I want to pause for a moment and ask you, how would you feel if the people you trusted most used your name to hurt others? Would you be able to forgive them? Or would the betrayal cut too deep? Let me know in the comments. Your voice matters, and I'd love to hear how this part of Jessica's story made you feel. Don't hold back. Someone else out there might need to hear that they're not alone. The next morning, I walked into Hallage Bank with Alex and Solstice beside me, a file of evidence in my hand, and a truth too heavy to carry alone. The branch manager, Frank Delaney, met us with a smile that quickly faded once he saw the documents. We placed them on the table, a mountain of proof. Forged signatures, fraudulent loan applications, IP logs, wire transfers, and the fake investment fund trail. Solstice calmly pointed to the screen. Every transaction, every credit pull, every login came from Madison's laptop, all from your parents' home. Frank's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. He looked up at me, someone he'd known for years as a responsible professional. "Jessica, your parents were here just this morning. They said you were trying to destroy the family name." I didn't flinch. "Then I suggest you take a closer look at what I brought. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And sometimes, telling the truth means standing in the middle of the fire and refusing to move." Not long after, 2 plainclothes officers arrived. They reviewed the files in silence, then looked me in the eye. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming forward. You've done the right thing." I nodded, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Frank called my parents and Madison under the pretense of clarifying the mortgage paperwork. They came casual, confident, even cheerful. My mother smiled like we were meeting for brunch. My father gave me a nod. Madison avoided my eyes. Then I slid the file across the table. "This is the truth. The truth you tried to bury under my name." Their faces changed. No more smiles. No more casual deflection. Just panic. When people are caught in a lie that's gone too far, they don't always confess. Sometimes they deny. Sometimes they double down. But the truth doesn't need anyone to believe it to exist. Just is. And when that truth is backed by evidence, silence becomes its own confession. Here's what I want you to remember. Justice doesn't happen by accident. It takes action, documentation, patience, and above all, courage. Courage to speak. Courage to be doubted. Courage to stand alone if that's what it takes to make it right. As the officers stepped forward and began reading the charges, my mother gasped. My father stood frozen. And Madison finally whispered, "You're really going to let them arrest us?" And I looked at her and said, "I'm not letting anything happen. You chose this. I'm just choosing not to protect the lie anymore." And as they were led away, my hands still trembled, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't from fear, they were from release. Federal Courtroom 4 in downtown Chicago was packed that morning. Rows of attorneys, investigators, victims, and one daughter who never imagined she'd be sitting across from her own family. I clutched my statement folder so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Across the room, my father sat in a worn gray suit, his eyes empty. My mother kept glancing at me like she was still trying to read my face. And Madison, she looked like a faded photograph of herself, pale, hollow-eyed, staring at the floor. The trial began. Their lawyers painted a familiar picture: financial hardship, family pressure, miscommunication. But when the prosecution stood, the story changed. They didn't use words like mistake or misunderstanding. They used phrases like deliberate misrepresentation, unauthorized use of identity, and fraud with intent to deceive. Because that's what it was. When they called me to the stand, I could barely feel my legs. But I stood, not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as someone finally choosing truth over silence. "My name is Jessica Carter," I began. "I'm a legal consultant, and I'm here because my name, my credit, my reputation, was used as a shield for something I never agreed to." I shared it all: the forged applications, the IP traces from my parents' home, the fraudulent fund built around my face. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just told the truth. And that was enough. You don't need to dramatize the truth when the facts are loud enough. And in court, it's not the emotion that wins the case. It's the evidence. People often say, "But it's your family." As if blood justifies betrayal. As if love means silence. But love without respect isn't love. It's guilt. And guilt doesn't get a seat in the courtroom. Here's something I learned that day. Telling the truth may cost you relationships, but keeping the truth buried will cost you your peace. And peace is worth everything. The judge flipped through the case files slowly, quietly. Then came the verdict. Gordon Carter, 18 years. Helen Carter, 15 years. Madison Carter, 12 years and permanent disqualification from any financial practice. I watched them react in silence. My mother sinking into her chair, Madison breaking into tears, and my father just staring forward, cold. As the officers prepared to escort them out, Madison turned to me one last time. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far." But deep down I knew she did. And the truth. They all did. The trial was over. But my story wasn't. Because justice in a courtroom is only the beginning. What you do after the gavel falls is what really defines your future. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I was meant to do next. 1 week after the sentencing, I returned to the law firm. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked those halls before. I wasn't just Jessica Carter, legal consultant. I was a survivor. Of betrayal, yes, but also of silence. And that's when the email came. It was from the board of directors. "Jessica, we've been following your case closely. We'd like to invite you to lead a new initiative, Reclaim Rise, a support program for people defrauded by their own family." I stared at that screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to say no, to leave it all behind, close the door, and never look back. But the braver part of me, the one that had sat in that courtroom, the one that had stood up when no one else would, she whispered, "You're not done yet." In the first week of launching Reclaim and Rise, we received over 300 messages. Most came from people who had no one left to turn to. Middle-aged women, elderly retirees, young adults drowning in debt they didn't create. One call I'll never forget came from a woman named Marlene. She was 67. She'd emptied her retirement savings to help her son get back on his feet. Now he's gone, she said quietly. No money, no home. And I feel so stupid. I held the phone to my ear and replied, "You're not stupid, Marlene. You're human. And believing in the people you love isn't a flaw. It's your strength." What I've learned is this. People who betray us don't just steal money. They steal our sense of safety, peace, sometimes even our belief in ourselves. But the good news is, those things can be reclaimed. Not all at once, but piece by piece. With support, with truth, with time. Here's what I tell every person who walks in to reclaim and rise. You didn't lose because you trusted. You were hurt because someone chose to betray that trust. And the moment you choose to speak, to heal, to rebuild, you've already begun to take it all back. One afternoon, I walked into my parents' old house. It had been turned over to the authorities after their assets were seized. But they let me collect a few personal belongings. In Madison's old drawer, tucked under a stack of old letters, found a notebook. The first page read, "River Pine Plan. Don't let Jessica find out." I didn't cry. I just closed the book and let it go. Because reclaiming what was stolen wasn't about getting back money. It was about getting back me. They say family is everything. That no matter what happens, you forgive, forget, and move on. Because they're your blood. But what if your blood is the very thing that drains you? What if the people who shared your last name never truly shared your heart? After the trial, after the house was emptied, after the voices had quieted and the tears had dried, I found myself sitting in a quiet auditorium. It was the first conference of Reclaim and Rise. Hundreds of chairs, dozens of stories, all different, but heartbreakingly similar. As I looked around the room, I didn't see victims. I saw survivors. I saw people who had been taken advantage of by siblings, spouses, parents, and yet were still standing. People who had chosen to speak, not in anger, but in strength. One young woman, Lindsay, stood up during the session and said through tears, "I used to think love meant staying quiet. But now I know silence isn't loyalty. It's surrender." That moment stuck with me. 'Cause I used to believe the same thing. We grow up being taught to protect our families at all costs. But no one teaches you how to protect yourself from your family. And that's why so many people stay quiet. Not because they don't know the truth, but because they're terrified of what speaking it might cost. But let me tell you something I've learned. Real family is not who shares your blood. It's who protects your heart. Here's the truth. Family is not defined by biology. It's defined by safety, by honesty, by love that doesn't demand silence in return. Sometimes you have to let go of what you were born into, to make space for what you're meant to grow into. And sometimes the people who make you feel seen, safe, and supported, they are your family now. That evening, as the room emptied, I stayed behind for a moment. I picked up a small note left behind on one of the chairs. It read, "Thanks to you, I've found the courage to start over." I held it in my hands for a while, because in those few words, I saw my old self, and the version of me I had become. Not just someone who lost a family, but someone who found a new one. And I knew, this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you trusted so deeply that their lies felt louder than any truth you'd ever known, this story is for you. Because I know what it's like to sit in that silence. To stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m., asking yourself, was it my fault? Did I miss the signs? Was I not enough? But here's the truth. It wasn't your fault. It was their choice. I used to think strength meant staying, enduring, keeping the peace for the sake of the family name. But now I know, real strength is walking away from what breaks you. Real strength is using your voice when you've been taught to stay quiet. Like the single mother who called us after her brother stole her identity. Like the grandfather whose daughter emptied his savings. Like the college student whose parents used his name for a loan he never applied for. Different faces, same wound. Here's what I hope you remember. You are not weak for choosing yourself. You are not wrong for setting boundaries. And you are never ever alone in your story. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go of the people who taught you love through guilt and pain through silence. Because healing begins the moment you stop protecting what hurt you and start protecting yourself. These days I spend more time building than grieving, more time listening than explaining. And I'm no longer chasing love from people who only knew how to take. Now I'm building a new kind of family. The kind made of trust, of truth, of people who show up when it's hard, not just when it's easy. And if you're listening right now, wondering if you're strong enough, you are. You always were. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your heart. And if you believe stories like this matter, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of healing, truth, and the courage it takes to begin again. Until next time, take care of yourself. You are worth protecting. Thank you for listening to Jessica's story. It wasn't just about identity theft or financial loss. It was about rediscovering strength in the face of betrayal, and learning that family doesn't always mean protection. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Love without respect isn't love. And sometimes, choosing truth means standing alone. But never in silence. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did this story make you feel? Have you ever faced something like this yourself? Share your reflections in the comments below. 'Cause your story matters too. And if this moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We have many more stories coming. Real, raw, and full of truth. Until next time, take care of yourself and protect what's yours.